Dear ladies and gentlemen, my name is Valerii Habrusiev and I'm here to give you a brief presentation on the quality control of the implementation of electronic learning in educational institutions. For Ukraine, the informatization of education is an extremely important issue in the context of its economic, social, and cultural development. The main direction is to create an education system focused on the use of the latest information computer technologies in the formation of the fully developed personality. The introduction of electronic learning involves not only the creation of electronic courses and the orientation of students to use them during classroom or independent work, but also control over the effectiveness of the created courses in the educational process. Monitoring the implementation of electronic learning allows you to build a model of student work, identify shortcomings of both organizational and technological plan, and take timely measures to remove them. The analysis of the effectiveness of the use of electronic courses should be carried out comprehensively, using the means of monitoring the educational process, such as surveys of teachers and students, performance analysis, etc. It is necessary to take into account the specifics of electronic learning, the tools of the Learning Resource Management System Moodle, and third-party services for collecting statistics and analysis of user activities in the Learning Resources Management System. Our study examines the use of tools for managing learning resources, Moodle, Google Analytics, and surveys of students and teachers. Given the importance of obtaining data on the operation and use of the training resource management system, the developers of Moodle have provided space for the collection of certain data for further analysis. Let's consider the most commonly used metrics that can be obtained directly in Moodle. The most active courses for a given period. This is an indicator for determining the total number of actions performed, like page loading, viewing study material, sending task, performing a test, by students and teachers. This parameter is quite relative and does not allow to objectively assess the activity of using electronic courses. As to balanced report on the most active courses for a given period, this indicator is defined as the average activity of a student or teacher. Courses with the largest number of registered students for a given period. This is the coefficient of student activity on the course, which is calculated as the ratio of the number of active users of the course to the total number of registered users. Courses that lead in the number of views for a given period. This is the coefficient of activity of students in the use of educational resources of the course and is calculated as the ratio of the total number of views of educational materials to the number of sent electronic mails or messages to the forum. Activities of teachers and students for a given course. This indicator characterizes the activity of students and teachers over a period of time. The report allows you to estimate the number of user activities in the system over a period of time for both the system as a whole and for a particular course. The register of events, like activity of students and teachers. It's detailed information about the activity of each user of the system and allows you to determine from which IP address the user worked, what actions they performed in the system, which course pages they downloaded. Given that the event logs contains data only on individual actions of each user, in particular, registration in the system, page loading, file loading, etc., further systematization and analysis of data is a rather complex process. To analyze the effectiveness of electronic learning, the most useful are data on the dynamics of users' work with the electronic course server during a given period, and a balanced report on the most active courses for a given period. In order to obtain advanced statistics for further analysis of the effectiveness of electronic learning, it's necessary to use other tools. Therefore, it's advisable to use third-party tools to retrieve data from Moodle. We recommend using Google Analytics to collect data. The interpretation of Google Analytics data from electronic learning sites may differ slightly from the general accepted interpretation of data for commercial or social networking sites. Let's consider the basic metrics that should be used to analyze the effectiveness of electronic learning. Sources of transition refer the address of the page from which user linked to the current one. This information is used for segmentation, analysis of traffic sources, determining the way students access the electronic course server, assessing the demand of the third parties for distance learning services, and more. The address of the page the user visited, like page views, information about visiting pages. This data allows you to determine which pages you visit most often, to determine in more detail the actions of students in the system, like performing tests, viewing or downloading studying materials, downloading tasks, etc. A daily activity of students, this is information on hourly activity of users during the day. The analysis of these data allows teachers to tentatively plan the time for online activities, especially during distance learning. Exact request time. This is the time of page visits by users and it's saved. Information about the time of the request allows you to determine when the students are most active in electronic courses and to plan the time of online events such as webinars. Average page view time. It's determining the average time users view pages. This parameter is quite relative but allows you to estimate the time of use of electronic courses by students. Failure rate determines the percentage of users who started browsing the site from this page and did not move to another, but immediately closed the site. This is the number of visitors, usually as a percentage of the total, who visited only one page on the site. Visitors, unique visitors, users, reach. The system analyzes all recorded page views and tries to determine which ones were made from one browser. Google Analytics determines the uniqueness of the visitor, leaving in their browser a cookie with a unique number during the first visit. With this metric, you can estimate the average number of users who use electronic courses for the selected period. Time on site, a metric that contains information about the time of user has spent on the site. Despite the relativity of this metric, it's still possible to draw some conclusions about the work of students with the electronic courses. And user settings, statistics system, technical characteristics of the user's gadget. The results of the analysis indicate that students are beginning to use mobile platforms more often. Survey of students and teachers. Surveys are one of the most common methods of obtaining information about respondents. During pedagogical, sociological researches, it's expedient to carry out inquiring by means of questionnaires. The information obtained can be used in the development of new training programs, the choice of teaching methods, ways of presenting information during the implementation of electronic learning. The results of the survey show that electronic learning or electronic courses is used mainly to provide independent, which is 53.8%, and individual work, which is 28.2% of students. The identified problems mainly relate to the regulatory framework of electronic learning, which is 56.4%, as well as methodological training of teachers, which is also confirmed by insufficient use of potential opportunities for electronic learning, which is 51.3%. As to conclusions, given the attention to electronic learning technologies and their implementation in the educational process of educational institutions of all levels of accreditation, it can be argued that the quality control of electronic learning, development of methods and appropriate tools for such monitoring will be constantly focused on methodologists and managers in education. The use of Google Analytics, Moodle learning resource management tools, teacher surveys to monitor the quality of electronic learning in the educational establishment proves its effectiveness and allows you to see all the advantages and disadvantages of the current implementation of electronic learning in the institution. Plan and implement measures for further development into and improvement of electronic learning. Thank you for your attention.